Are you ready to create the teaching career and life you desire? You're back in the third and final episode of this series where we'll talk all about how you can follow through on your goals and intentions that you got more clear on in the first two episodes in this series. We'll also talk about what to do when things don't go quite as expected, because that is going to happen. Welcome to Educate and Rejuvenate the podcast, a 3-step framework to revitalize your teaching, renew your spirit, and reignite your passion for life. Part 3, align yourself. Welcome to Educate and Rejuvenate, the podcast to help you revitalize your teaching, renew your spirit, and reignite your passion for life. I'm your host, Kelsey Sorensen, a former teacher, current homeschool mom, published author, and certified life coach. Whether you are a teacher in a traditional classroom, homeschool from your kitchen table, or anywhere in between, I am on a mission to help you not only survive as an educator, but thrive. Get ready to uplevel your skills with incredible insights from guest experts and discover the missing piece, rejuvenating yourself. Are you ready to both educate and rejuvenate? Let's go. I am feeling such a high after our book launch week. It's been so much fun being there with all of you. Thanks to everyone who grabbed a copy, joined in on the lives, engaged on social media posts, and however you participated in the book launch, even just listening to this podcast, thank you for being here. And for those of you already diving into the book, I hope that you are enjoying it. I hope that you have opened up that book. If not, totally okay. Here's just a little reminder. It's there whenever you need it. Here's what's being said about the book so far. Hannah Guajardo, she's one of our members of the club. We actually had an episode with her a while back. She said, I feel like everything I've ever learned in the club is now tied in a neat package in this book. It gives my ADHD brain a more organized understanding of every call I've ever been to in the past year. This book is like clarity for my brain. So again, this is going to give you a huge jump start, even over those who joined the club before. Now is the time, because you can snag this book. It's going to give you a huge baseline to make this podcast more meaningful, to make, if you decide to do the club, to make that experience more meaningful, but you don't have to. It is going to make such a difference for you when you snag this book. Gaspar Randazzo, who was one of our keynotes at our Educate and Rejuvenate this summer, here's what he had to say. Kelsey is doing wonders for the world of education. Not only is she providing professional development and learning opportunities for teachers, but she is also giving them a safe space to listen to and hear other educators who are going through similar experiences. Between her company's events and their podcast and their social media platforms, Educate and Rejuvenate is giving teachers access to multiple ways of connecting with other educators. And of course, one of those is this book. So we are so thrilled to have his endorsement. Malia Hollowell from Plato to Plato, who has also been on the podcast, here's what she had to say about the book. And she's one of my friends, and she read it and she was like, this book is so good. And I was so thrilled, because she is an amazing book as well. Here's what she had to say. She said, the daily grind of deadlines, grading, and endless faculty meetings can leave you feeling drained and overwhelmed. But Kelsey's game-changing tools and mindset shifts provide an easy-to-follow framework that will help you reclaim your energy and passion for teaching. It's not just a book, it's a soul makeover. And then finally, here's another review from one of our early readers. Sarah said, coaching is so valuable. It makes me feel like I'm not alone in my stressful life situations. I love supporting and learning from my fellow teachers. They say it takes a village to raise a child, but it is also true of being a teacher. My village is the Educate and Rejuvenate community. I love the book because it explains the process of coaching in an understandable way. I participated in live and recorded sessions for years and struggled with thoughts versus circumstances. The examples in the book perfectly clarified for me. The thoughtfulness and emotions help others to relate to the model. I am ready to start my own journey through the model and make some changes. From Sarah Snyder. So again, this book is already making a difference in lives, and I want it to do so for you too. And if you grab it now, as this episode drops, the book club that we are doing to come together and talk about the book and apply the tools and get questions answered and share with each other, not just me teaching you, but also you learning from each other, from others who have been doing this for a while, who will also be there, and those who are brand new, all coming together every 3 weeks through December 5th, starting September 26th. We will be getting together to do a book club on the book. So it gives you 3 weeks to do some reading and then come together and talk about it and talk about the exercises exercises. And even if you haven't done all the reading, we've done book clubs, but we did the book club with Christina's book, and half the people there hadn't done it yet. Totally fine. It still gives you a great background for when you do dive into the book. So definitely you're going to want to attend those. If you snag a copy of the book, we're inviting everybody. Our book club is usually only for our Educate and Rejuvenate Club members, but for this one, we're inviting everybody who snags at least one copy of the book. You're going to be invited to this book club. So again, for the $26.95 for a paperback copy or $9.99 for a Kindle copy, you get to join this book club, this community that's going to have coaching, that's going to have people coming together, learning and applying these tools. You're going to get the app access. Again, our app is not public yet. We're going to eventually have public access to some free things, but you're going to get a section, a book readers only section that is going to have tutorials on all the things in your workbook, that is going to host all the replays of the book club calls. So if you weren't able to attend live, or if you're listening to this later and the book club is over, you're still going to have access to those replays. So I'll share more about the book club at the end of this episode. I really do want to get into this content. So here today, we're talking about step 3 of the framework. We've already talked about observing yourself, which is paying attention to your thoughts, your feelings, your nervous system. I'm not going to take a ton of time on reviewing these today. If you have not listened to those yet, I highly recommend going back and listening to step 1 and step 2, and then coming back to this episode. Step 2, we talked about choosing your direction, and that's taking the observations that you've done and really answering the question, what do I want in teaching, in life? How do I need to think to get that? What goals do I need to create? Kind of creating a plan for doing it. And then today, aligning yourself is basically taking those observations, taking those goals, and following through and aligning yourself with them and noticing when you're off track and coming back. So here's what the section description, which I described in the book. We have 3 sections, right? So this is the 3rd section with the final 3 chapters. And I have a section divider that explains the section before. So that reads for section 3, align yourself. It says, now that you've observed yourself, set intentions, and chosen your direction, it's time to align your inner compass. Similar to navigating a forest, using a compass, this process is ongoing. Continuously check in to ensure you're headed in the chosen direction while staying true to your values and your why. The journey involves a perpetual self-observation, assessing alignment with your chosen path, and making necessary course corrections. Embrace the inevitability of veering off course, recognizing it as a natural aspect of the human experience. And again, I mentioned in last week's episode, each section divider has a little staircase that you go up, and it perfectly ties into the introduction to this of the book especially. I don't want to spoil that here, but we'll definitely talk about it in the book club when you join and get a physical copy. But basically, you're climbing up this staircase. And the first one is to observe yourself. Then when you choose your direction, there's still the foundation of the step before under it. And then now you're on the top step. You're aligning yourself. And so the first thing we talk about in this section is alignment versus balance. And it's kind of like we've been talking about with delegating on the recent podcast we did about how to delegate more this school year. And we talked about the urgent and important. Without you even knowing it, we've been talking about a lot of things on the podcast that fall into these 3 categories. So it's actually why we have this framework, is because it's such an open framework that as we apply new tools and everything, it's still going to mostly fall under observe yourself, choose your direction, and align yourself, right? Those are very broad categories. We're going to continue talking about these things. There are definitely tools and things you can do that aren't in the book that we'll continue to talk about. But again, I chose the main ones, the ones you're going to want to start with, to be here inside the book. And we've been talking about them on the podcast all along. So without even knowing it, we've been talking about these things, falling into these 3 categories on the podcast, like intentional scheduling, morning and evening routines, vision boards. I have separate episodes about all of those, which we'll link to in the show notes. Honoring boundaries, so important for alignment. We talk about all these in depth in the book. I'm not going to be able to talk about each one of these individually today on the podcast, so I will link to all those episodes so you can listen to them if you're like, ooh, I want to learn more about creating a vision board. I want to learn more about intentional scheduling or morning and evening routines, or how to honor boundaries. Like, all of these are so important. But the biggest thing to note with aligning yourself is it is just doing those things, right? Being intentional with your schedule, creating those routines, the vision board. It's whatever you can do to align yourself, to remind yourself of your why, of the direction you chose, following through on your goals, tracking your habits. So you can see, like, in the workbook, we have habit trackers. So every day you can track, like, if you're doing those things in the morning and evening routine to help you align yourself. We have the ideal week and the weekly planning pages so you can create your intentional schedule like we've talked about here on the podcast. We have worksheets that help you to define what's urgent, define what's important. Journal prompts are going to help you. All these things to help you really not just learn about, like you've been doing here on the podcast, but apply everything that you're learning. And our success in everything is not dependent on us always doing everything right? Because we're not going to feel happy 100% of the time. We're not going to always do things exactly like we planned. So we need to believe that we can catch ourselves when we get off of our intentional schedule. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't plan this week, or I put too many things on my to-do list, or I didn't do my evening routine. I just was so tired. I crashed from a long day at school or parent-teacher conferences or whatever, or I haven't been using my vision board, or it's not up to date or whatever. You're not going to be perfect all the time. But we need to believe that we can catch ourselves faster and faster each time when we get off track and choose again. So really part of aligning is continuing to choose, right? And these steps are really kind of interchangeable in a way as well. And one of my favorite authors, Gabrielle Bernstein, she explains this in a way that I love. She says, a quick comeback rate is how quickly you restore your thoughts to love. And I love that because a lot of times, again, it's the judgment that creeps in, right? It's like us judging ourselves for not being on that intentional schedule or not sticking to our morning routines or, you know, our goals or the habits, all those things that we talk about in these chapters. Simply put, is us noticing we're off track, switching from judgment, like, oh yeah, I realized I wasn't doing this, really getting clear again, observing, why did this happen? Was I being too hard on myself? All those things. Was I being too hard on myself? Was I trying to expect myself to do too much? Is this really what I want? Like all these things where we can just redirect and come back. So we increase that comeback rate, how quickly we go from not doing what we planned on to noticing and redirecting. The more we do it, the faster the more often that we are being conscious and aligning ourselves and checking in, the more that'll become natural. The more we'll just naturally be checking in and being like, am I following through on my goals? Am I being intentional with my planning? Or am I suddenly saying yes to everybody at school and doing absolutely everything that they want me to do? And in the process, I am not able to do as much of my family, which is important to me. So it's just being really conscious of all those things and noticing. And it's also about noticing the wins too, owning your wins. That is a huge part of aligning yourself because again, our brain has a negativity bias. It's really going to notice all the things that are going wrong. So we also want to notice like, oh, where did I go really well with my schedule this week? I went 3 days doing my morning routine. All week I close my exercise ring on my Apple Watch, or all week I did the mini lesson with my kids on social emotional learning that I really wanted to add in. So it's noticing those wins and acknowledging them because we so often don't. And so even in the book and in your workbook that you'll get when you purchase the book, we have a worksheet that's going to help you. And you can do this again, just from listening to the podcast here too, every day to be able to notice 3 wins that you had, and then notice ones that you think you're going to have tomorrow. And then the next day would say, oh yeah, I did those. And I also did these things, and tracking and noticing all the good that is happening because it's so easy for our brain to focus on where we're going wrong, where we're not going the right direction. And part of aligning ourselves is noticing where we are. And then we're training our brain to notice that because then it feels good to notice that, right? It feels good to be like, oh, I am doing this right. And then we're more likely going to keep doing it because we're noticing, we're actually celebrating. It's like with our students, when we give that positive feedback, right? When you're like to a student, you're like, oh, I get so much more powerful with a student when we like notice and point out when they're doing what we want them to do versus always just getting on them about what they're not doing. So why don't we do that with ourselves, right? Why don't we notice when we're doing it right, giving ourselves that positive reinforcement that's going to be like, oh, that felt good. I should keep doing that. And then I'll keep giving myself that positive reinforcement, right? Even some things like recently on a coaching call with one of our members, we talked about doing a marble jar. Again, a lot of these things we do with our students, we can do with ourselves. Brooke Castillo, my mentor at the Life Coach School, she actually teaches like, yeah, making a marble jar for ourselves. Get some beautiful marbles. And every time you do that thing you want to do, put a marble in the jar. You get that dopamine hit. It feels really good. And you're training your brain like, yeah, this is what I want to be doing. And that's what aligning ourselves is. It's about helping us stay the course, helping us to create that life we want. Or every time I honor a boundary, I put a marble in the jar. Every time I stick to my schedule, I put a marble in the jar. And you can choose what it's for. Maybe you make a jar for a specific thing, or just every time you're kind of aligning yourself in the direction you want to go. But that's just one example and a way to think of like, what are the things you do to help your students that you can do to help yourself too? And again, that's even a tangent. None of that was actually in the book. That was just here for all of you on the podcast today based on, I'm always going to have new insights and feedback as I do more coaching. I'm coaching all the time every week and want to share what I learned, because I learned from all of you too. And it's amazing. And That's a big part of it, right? Is this coming together and learning from each other. That's a huge part of it. And actually ties right into the next thing I wanted to talk about here on the podcast, which is community. And that's a big part of what I talk about in chapter 11 of the book, is how important that is and how research backed it is. We want to be really mindful of the type of people we surround ourselves with, of our social circles that we cultivate, because who we surround ourselves with ultimately shapes who we become. And there's a phrase I've heard, and there's like even a meme we posted like on Instagram before, or I don't know if you call it a meme, I guess it's more like a quote, but it's like, they say that who you surround, oh gosh, I can't remember the wording. That's okay. You all forgive me. They say you are a combination of the 5 people you surround yourself with the most. So surround yourself with positive, happy teachers, and you'll more likely be a positive, happy teacher too. And this is research backed. Like I mentioned in my book, I cite a study from David McClellan of Harvard University. He closely studied high achievers for 25 years. So this is like a long-term study. And he found that the most essential factor for determining their success in their life, in their career, was their reference group, meaning the people that they spend the most time with, like we were just mentioning. And this makes sense because as we learned in last week's episode, in the Choose Your Direction one, and especially even more in the book, we naturally want to fit in with those around us, right? It's that love and belonging. It's that bottom of the tier of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right after our safety and just biological needs, we need love and belonging. And so when part of being belonging to a community is actually doing things that are a positive influence on your life rather than a negative influence on your life, or people pleasing and all that, there's the positive and the negative to everything, right? There's the 50-50, a community and wanting that love and belonging when we're like using it in a way where it's like, I have to make these people happy to validate myself. That's not healthy. But when it's like, I want to be with these people because we want to lift each other up. We want to help and support each other. And we want to cheer each other on. That is so powerful, because when it's like the rising boat, a rising tide lifts all the boats, right? So we help lift each other up. And that is a huge part of aligning ourselves, is finding a community that can support you. And that can be teachers at your school, or a homeschool co-op if you're a homeschool mom. It can be people in your neighborhood. It can be people at a local gym or a yoga studio or community that you join. There are also amazing online communities, such as the Educate and Rejuvenate community, right? We have a free Facebook group where we can discuss what you're learning on the podcast each week. We also very soon will have a free community on our app. There's going to be community sections that are only for members, but there will be a free section as well. So where we can all come together and learn and grow from each other. And also, again, those of you who purchase a copy of the book, you're going to be able to join the book club. If you buy before December 2024, you're going to be able to join and come live. Each week we'll be able to discuss these concepts and lift each other up. And we're utilizing that in a positive way, right? We are coming together to lift each other up. It's going to start in just a few days. For those of you, if you're listening live, we're going to talk about introduction through chapter 3 on September 26th, chapters 4 and 5 on October 17th, chapters 6 through 8 on November 7th, chapters 9 through conclusion on November 28th, and we author Q&A bonus call on December 5th. All of these will be at 5 p.m. Mountain Time, which is 4 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Mountain, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern. Again, if that time doesn't work for you, you're going to get access to the replays. We're going to have a community in the app where we're going to be able to talk about the book. We're going to have still ways to come together and talk about it. And if you're listening to this after, all the replays will be available, even if like you hadn't even purchased the book yet when the calls are happening live, but you're going to get access to those. And it's a great way for us to come together. And also, if you aren't a member of the club yet, we're going to give you a month to try it out if you would like when you purchase a copy of the book, which can help you see if this Educate and Rejuvenate community is one you want to be a part of long term. It's really low pressure. It's easy to cancel if you decide it's not for you, but so many of our community members have found that this community is their community, right? Their people. That's what Sarah said at the beginning of this episode. She said it's her village, right? And I would love for you to join our village if it's the right fit for you. But no matter what, I want you to make sure you find that community in some way or another, whether it's with us or not. I care about your well-being, and that community is such a powerful part of aligning yourself to a common goal. And the other great thing is you can have more than one community, right? So I have my Educate and Rejuvenate community that I love. I also have several coaching communities that I'm part of people who are coaches who are learning to be better coaches, people who are growing their businesses. I have a community, I have a yoga studio community. I have the strength training gym that I go to. And with all of these, I'm having different communities for different aspects of my life. So it's not just like your one community. You can have community in multiple places. You might have online communities. You might have in-person communities that help and lift and support you. I feel like you can never have too much community, and especially if you have ones that are targeted toward different areas of your life, like maybe Educate and Rejuvenate Club is really going to help you elevate with other educators and people who are wanting to improve their lives overall. And then you have like, an in-person community as well, like whatever it is. You want to make sure that you find that community that's going to help lift you up. And here's why. Here's a quote actually from the book. I just love giving you sneak peeks of the actual book. So it says, coming together as a community is one of the most substantial ways to help you improve your comeback rate, as you aren't just creating a shift in your identity as someone who keeps promises to yourself. You're joining a group of people doing it right along with you. Together, we refuse to become victims of the struggles that arise as we teach, but use them as opportunities to rise stronger. We will cheer on another educator's wins as if they are our own. Instead of using another's triumph to feel bad about ourselves, we see their progress as inspiration for what's possible. No matter what comes our way, we have a soft place to land where we can share our misguided thoughts, worst fears, and perspectives without shame or judgment, only love. And that love that our community shows is just unprecedented. It is my favorite part about what I do when we all come together. And again, you're going to get that community when you purchase your copy, the book club over the next few months, also the free month if you want to try out the club for new members when you purchase as well. Also, there are more bonuses if you decide to buy 2 copies, one for you, one for a friend. That gives you accountability buddy. Again, that's community, right? So we'll link to where you can learn more about the current bonuses in the show notes and the episode description. So you'll be able to find that link right on Apple or Spotify. So you can learn about all the bonuses you're going to get, such as the beautiful workbook, the book club calls and replays, the pre-recorded video trainings on each exercise. Just so much. We want to have this $26 book that you purchase or $9.99 book on Kindle to be like as if you bought like a $200 course. We're giving you so much content that is going to help you up-level your life. So grab your copy of the book if you haven't yet. And if you have, it would mean so much to me if you leave a review of the book on Amazon. Again, that's really going to help us find more teachers, help more teachers know that this book is for them, that this community is for them. And it means so much to me when you do that, because again, it's not about me, it's about all of us coming together. And I want this movement, this educate and rejuvenate movement, because all of us were educating, right? But not all of us are rejuvenating. I want the message to get out to more teachers. So leave me a review. The book is the best way to help me out with that right now. And it's free. It just takes a minute of your time. Even better if you have a copy of the book and you can take a picture of yourself holding the book, like that makes the review even more powerful. Amazon really likes that. So again, and if you've already done it and you're like, oh, I didn't add a picture, and you want to, you totally can. But again, also don't let that stop you. I would love for you to just leave a review in whatever way you can. Okay, that is it for this 3-part series. I hope you enjoyed it. If you missed either of the first 2 episodes, please, I highly recommend going back and listening to those. And if you wanted to check out those other episodes about aligning yourself, like about the vision board or about creating an intentional schedule, you can scroll through the podcast. We have so many episodes that fall into this 3-step framework. They're going to help you. This podcast is a resource for you. And then next week, I have an interview with Lana Penley, who's the author of another upcoming book, Unlocking Social Emotional Learning. And it really ties in a lot to what we're doing here. So you're going to want to hear that episode. She shares so many tips on how you can incorporate social emotional learning in your classroom. So make sure you're subscribed to the podcast and we'll talk then. Thank you for joining me on Educate and Rejuvenate the podcast today. If you love what you heard in this episode, be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you're hungry for even more, be sure to check out the book that I wrote. It's called Educate and Rejuvenate, a 3-step guide to revitalize your teaching, renew your spirit, and reignite your passion for life. It takes everything you learn here on the podcast and that I teach our members inside the Educate and Rejuvenate Club into a guidebook you can refer to again and again. One of our early readers said it was like clarity for her brain. Plus, it's not only a book. With your purchase, you'll get a full PDF guide with exercises and links to videos and more so that you can not only consume but apply everything that you learn. If you're ready to make Educate and Rejuvenate not just a podcast you passively listen to, but a lifestyle that you put into action, it's time to grab your copy on Amazon today. Or head to educateandrejuvenate.com/book to read the first chapter and the introduction today.